Hey there, I'm Serafina Vaughn. You know, I thought loyalty, hard work, and sacrifice meant something, especially when it came to family. I built an empire. I saved our family business from bankruptcy. And just when I thought I had secured my place, my father looked me in the eye and said, "It's your sister's now." No recognition, no gratitude. Just betrayal, wrapped in a $50 bill, tossed onto the table like a tip for a waitress. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? They had been planning my downfall for years. They stole my work, erased my name, and when I fought back, they tried to destroy me completely. The Vaughn family dining room was the picture of elegance: pristine white linens, polished silverware, and a chandelier casting its golden glow over the mahogany table. The scent of seared steak and red wine filled the air, a contrast to the growing tension settling in my chest. I had been here 1,000 times before, in this very seat, listening to my father speak with the authority of a man who had built an empire from the ground up. But tonight felt different. Margaret, my mother, sat in silence, her eyes darting toward me every few moments before quickly turning away. Celeste, my younger sister, exuded the same effortless confidence she always did. Her silk dress draped perfectly, her manicured fingers circling the rim of her wineglass. And then there was my father, Dominic Vaughn, the man I had idolized for most of my life, the man I had nearly destroyed myself trying to impress. As the conversation flowed around business updates and upcoming mergers, I waited. This was it, the moment he would finally acknowledge me, the moment he would recognize what I had done. I had saved Vaughn Enterprises. When our logistics division was on the verge of collapse, when our outdated systems were hemorrhaging money, I had built the software that turned everything around. I had spent years working tirelessly, rewriting algorithms, optimizing data flows, burning through sleepless nights to craft the very system that catapulted us back to the top. And tonight, I would finally hear the words I had been waiting for. Dominic set his knife down, his movements deliberate. "Serafina," he said, his voice even, controlled. "I want to thank you for all the work you've done for the company. Truly, you've been invaluable in restructuring our tech operations." A swell of pride rose in my chest. "But leadership," he continued, "is about more than technical brilliance. It's about presence, vision, the ability to command a room and inspire people. And that's why, moving forward, Celeste will be taking over as CEO of Vaughn Enterprises." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I blinked, certain I had misheard him. Celeste? I glanced at my sister, expecting to see the same surprise reflected in her expression, but all I saw was a slow, knowing smile as she took another sip of wine. My voice was steady, but my hands clenched beneath the table. "Excuse me?" My father sighed, as if he were explaining something simple to a child. "You'll still have an important role in the company, of course, but—" "No." My voice cut through the air, sharper than I intended. "No, I built the system that saved us. Without it, without me, this company wouldn't even be standing right now." He chuckled. Actually chuckled. Celeste set her glass down, finally deigning to speak. "Serafina, don't be dramatic. You're great at what you do, but running a company is different. Some of us are just born for leadership." I felt the heat rise to my face. I turned back to my father. "Tell me this is a joke." Dominic exhaled, shaking his head. Then, as if it were the most casual thing in the world, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed something onto the table. A crumpled $50 bill. "For your effort," he said simply. I stared at the money, my entire world tilting. Years of sacrifice. Years of pouring my soul into this company, into his legacy. The late nights, the missed holidays, the exhaustion. The belief that if I just worked hard enough, he would finally see me. $50. Celeste let out a soft chuckle. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You're overreacting." I turned to my mother, searching her face for any sign of protest. Any sign that she would speak up for me. But she didn't. She just lowered her gaze to her plate. Something inside me broke. Slowly, I picked up the bill, turning it over between my fingers. Then, with careful precision, I folded it into my napkin, placed it beside my untouched plate, and stood. Dominic sighed again. "Serafina, don't be—" "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'm excusing myself." Celeste smirked, her amusement barely contained. Margaret opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I simply walked out, my heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving behind everything I had spent my entire life trying to earn. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I walked into Vaughn Enterprises, ready to reclaim my place, but my name was already gone. The lobby hummed with the usual morning chaos. Assistants rushed by with coffee trays, executives murmured over last-minute reports, and the front desk phone rang in a steady rhythm. But something was off. I could feel it before I even reached the elevator. Eyes flickered toward me, then quickly away. Conversations hushed as I passed, replaced by the artificial click of heels against polished floors. I squared my shoulders. It didn't matter. Last night had been a mistake, a misunderstanding. My father had always been ruthless in business, but even he had to see reason. The doors to the executive floor slid open with a soft chime, and I stepped out, expecting the familiar sight of my office at the end of the hallway. Instead, I was met with a name I didn't recognize. The glass panel that once read Serafina Vaughn, Chief Technology Officer, had been replaced. My title, my identity, erased overnight. A cold weight settled in my stomach as I pushed open the door. The room was almost unrecognizable. My desk was gone. My computer, my files, every trace of my presence, vanished. The space had been rearranged, sleek and minimalistic, with a designer handbag perched on the polished wood. And sitting behind that desk, flipping idly through a stack of documents, was Celeste. She looked up with an easy smile, her posture relaxed, her fingers drumming against the armrest. "Good morning, Serafina. Didn't Dad tell you? This is my office now." I didn't move, didn't speak. My brain struggled to process the words. Celeste let out a soft laugh. "Oh, don't look so surprised. You knew this was coming, didn't you?" My voice came out quiet, but firm. "What's my position now?" She tilted her head, pretending to consider. That's a good question. Maybe something in IT support? You were always good with computers." Rage burned in my chest, hot and suffocating. I clenched my fists at my sides. "I built the system that saved this company. Without me, you'd have nothing." Celeste leaned forward, her smirk widening. "Yes, but you see, we own the rights to that system now, and we don't need you anymore." The air thickened. The walls of the office felt smaller, closing in. I barely heard the footsteps approaching behind me until a hesitant voice broke the silence. "Miss Vaughn?" I turned. A security guard, someone I vaguely recognized from the lower floors, stood there, shifting uncomfortably. He avoided my eyes as he spoke again. "I was told to escort you out." The final blow. I glanced at Celeste one last time, but she was already reaching for her phone, attention elsewhere, as if I was nothing more than an interruption in her morning routine. Everything I had built, gone. Everyone I had trusted, silent. I took a slow breath and turned toward the exit. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scene, no pleading, no arguing. I walked out with my head high, past the rows of employees who wouldn't even meet my gaze. Past the walls that once held my late-night work sessions, my triumphs, my sacrifices. The cold morning air hit my skin as I stepped outside, my breath fogging in the chill. I looked up at the towering building, the empire my father had built, the empire I had saved, and I made a promise to myself. If they didn't want me in their empire, I would build my own, and I would burn theirs to the ground. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been planned for years. The weight of realization pressed against my chest as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered career. Legal documents lay sprawled across the coffee table, their dense paragraphs blurring together under the dim glow of a single lamp. Empty coffee cups and unopened takeout containers lined the counter, evidence of days spent locked in my own head, replaying everything over and over. The moment my father tossed that $50 bill onto the table, the way Celeste smirked as she took my office, the hushed whispers in the hallway when I walked through Vaughn Enterprises for the last time. But it wasn't until now, sitting in the wreckage, that I understood the full extent of their betrayal. They hadn't just pushed me out. They had erased me. I sifted through the stack of legal documents my lawyer had sent over that morning, scanning the words again, though I already knew what they said. Vaughn Enterprises had filed for full ownership of my software months before I was removed. The contracts were airtight. Somehow they had transferred everything into their control without me noticing. A sick feeling curled in my stomach as I flipped through the paperwork. My name wasn't on the patents anymore. Celeste's was. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't an overnight decision. It wasn't some impulsive power grab. They had been planning this. A memory surfaced, hazy but clear enough to make my hands tremble. It was 2 years ago. I was in my father's office, exhausted from working another 60-hour week, reviewing system updates with him when he slid a stack of papers toward me. "Just standard agreements," he had said, his tone almost dismissive. "We're making a few structural changes, but nothing that affects you directly. Sign where I've marked." And I had, without reading them. My stomach twisted with self-loathing. They had stolen my work in broad daylight, and I had handed it to them. Anger surged, hot and consuming. I grabbed my phone, fingers numb as I dialed my father's number. He picked up on the third ring. "Serafina." His voice was unreadable, smooth as ever. "You stole my software." My voice shook, but not with fear. With rage. He sighed, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Business is business. You were careless." I gritted my teeth. "You took my life's work and gave it to Celeste. Don't you feel even a little ashamed?" He chuckled, the sound cold and cutting. "Serafina, it's done. Move on." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Then I ended the call. My heart pounded as I turned back to the papers, my father's words ringing in my ears. "Move on!" That was his final dismissal, his last effortless rejection. I grabbed the nearest stack of contracts and threw them against the wall. Pages scattered across the floor, my breath coming in sharp bursts. I had been blind. I had trusted them. Never again. A strange calm settled over me as I straightened. The fury was still there, burning steady beneath my skin, but it wasn't chaotic anymore. It was focused. They thought they'd taken everything. They forgot. I'm the one who built it in the first place. I knew there was no turning back. If I wanted revenge, I had to build something bigger, stronger, untouchable. The weight of that decision settled over me as I sat in a quiet cafe, my fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Across from me, my mother stirred her tea absently, her gaze avoiding mine. I had asked her to meet me here for one reason, to hear the truth. "You knew," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You knew what they were doing to me." Margaret Vaughn exhaled, setting her spoon down with a soft clink. "Your father. He always had a different vision, Serafina. He never saw you as the one to lead Vaughn Enterprises." I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "I saved that company, and he gave it to Celeste like I was nothing." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I wanted to stop it," she whispered, eyes filled with something dangerously close to regret. "But Dominic, once he makes up his mind, there's no changing it. A lifetime of knowing this woman, of seeing her stand by a man who crushed anything he couldn't control, and still, a part of me had hoped she would choose me." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "If you're not with me, then don't expect to be part of what comes next." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. And in that silence, I knew. I was truly alone in this fight. I stood, dropping a few bills on the table, before walking out into the cold Chicago air. Alone, but not broken. That night, I started reaching out. To the people who mattered. The ones Vaughn Enterprises had discarded, just like they had discarded me. Matthias Reed, our former CFO, who had kept the company afloat in its worst years before being pushed out when Celeste brought in one of her useless networking friends. Vera Holt, a data analyst who had built the company's predictive models from the ground up, only to be let go when she questioned Celeste's reckless spending. Cassian Ford, the lead engineer who had helped me design my software, the only other person who truly understood its intricacies. We met in the back room of a small cafe, far from Vaughn Enterprises and its long-reaching influence. The air was thick with unspoken frustration, with old wounds that had never healed. Matthias leaned forward, his expression sharp. "We know what Celeste is doing to the company. The question is, what's your next move?" I met each of their gazes. "We build something better. We build something they can't touch." Cassian smirked, nodding. "They own your old code, but they don't own your mind." For the first time in weeks, a flicker of something close to hope ignited in my chest. We spent the next several hours sketching out the foundation of what would become Nova Systems. A new generation of logistics software. Faster, smarter, completely independent of Vaughn Enterprises' outdated model. But the biggest challenge wasn't the technology. It was the funding. Matthias leaned back, rubbing his chin. "We need investors, and I know just the people Celeste pissed off." I exhaled, staring down at the scribbled plans in front of me. This was my second chance. They had taken everything from me, but in return, they had given me a reason to fight. That night, I stood outside Vaughn Enterprises one last time. The towering building loomed over me, the name glowing against the night sky. But for the first time, I felt nothing. I whispered to myself, "I don't need your empire. I'll build my own." Celeste thought she had won. She had no idea. She just started a war. It didn't take long for Vaughn Enterprises to start crumbling under Celeste's reign. And I was just getting started. The first signs were subtle. A few whispered conversations among former clients, vague reports about internal restructuring. But then Matthias slid a folder across the table toward me, and I saw the truth in black and white. "Vaughn Enterprises is hemorrhaging clients," he said, his tone even, though I could see the satisfaction behind his eyes. "They lost 3 major contracts this quarter alone." I flipped through the pages, my pulse steady. The numbers didn't lie. Vaughn Enterprises' projected revenue had taken a steep dive, and the biggest blow? One of their longest-standing clients had just signed with Nova Systems. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table. "It's starting." Inside Vaughn Enterprises, chaos had already begun to spread. Senior executives, people who had been with the company for years, were handing in their resignations. Celeste, of course, refused to see the problem. "This is just a temporary setback," she told the board, dismissing concerns with a wave of her hand. "We're restructuring. They'll come crawling back." But not everyone was as blind. Nathan Wolfe, one of my father's longest-serving legal advisors, finally broke his silence. "Dominic, your daughter is running this company into the ground." I could almost picture the look on my father's face when those words hit him, but he still defended her. "She'll figure it out," he said. "She just needs time." Time wasn't something Celeste had, and I made sure of that. It was at a high-profile tech event when our paths finally crossed again. I wasn't there for the spectacle, but for the strategy, to make sure the right people knew that Nova Systems was the future. Celeste, on the other hand, walked in like she still ruled the world, draped in designer confidence. When she spotted me, her lips curled into a smirk. "Still playing in the minor leagues, sister?" she taunted, swirling the champagne in her glass. I met her gaze without flinching. "I don't need to. Your empire is crumbling." Her smirk faltered for just a second, but Celeste never backed down easily. "You should start preparing for failure," I said, voice cold and certain. "It's coming faster than you think." She let out a laugh, shaking her head. "We'll see who wins, little sister." Then she turned, walking away as if she had nothing to worry about. She thought she was invincible. She had no idea she was already standing on a sinking ship. Celeste's desperation would only grow. And desperate people make reckless decisions. I knew she wouldn't sit back and watch as Nova Systems thrived while Vaughn Enterprises crumbled. She had spent her life believing she was entitled to success, convinced that her name alone guaranteed her victory. But the world was starting to see what I had always known. Celeste was nothing without people like me cleaning up her mess. And now, there was no one left to save her. I woke up to a notification flood on my phone. News alerts, emails, frantic messages from Matthias. Something was wrong. When I saw the headline, I felt the anger settle deep in my chest. Nova Systems under investigation. CEO accused of fraud. The article was worse than I expected. It claimed Nova Systems had built its foundation on stolen intellectual property from Vaughn Enterprises. Anonymous sources suggested my entire company was operating on technology that wasn't mine. That I wasn't the visionary behind it, but a thief. A calculated hit. I knew exactly who was behind it. My hands tightened around my phone as I read through the article, breaking down each lie for what it was. Celeste was playing dirty, but she had underestimated me. Later that day, Vaughn Enterprises called a last-minute press conference. The media swarmed their headquarters, eager to get the latest on what was being called one of the most shocking corporate betrayals in recent years. And Celeste, standing in front of the cameras, relished every second of it. "Nova Systems," she said, her voice smooth and rehearsed, "is built on ideas that do not belong to Serafina Vaughn. My sister's company is profiting from proprietary software that she had no right to take." I stood at the back of the crowded room, unseen, but I heard every word. "We are calling for an official investigation," she continued, glancing at the reporters like she had already won. "We will ensure that justice is served." She was playing the perfect role, the wronged CEO, the victim of a supposed betrayal. The media ate it up. I could have stayed quiet. I could have let the press cycle run its course, but I never let Celeste have the last word. I stepped forward, and the moment I did, the room shifted. Reporters turned, murmurs spread. Celeste's carefully maintained expression faltered. I met her gaze as I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor. She recovered quickly, plastering on a fake smile. "Well, look who decided to join us." I took my time picking up the microphone, making sure the room was silent before I spoke. "You think you can erase me?" My voice was steady, sharp. "I'm still here." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. That was all I needed. That night, I met with my PR team. The battle had officially begun. "We fight back," Matthias said. "We expose them." He pulled up a list of every move Celeste had made since taking over Vaughn Enterprises. The reckless spending, the poor leadership, the backroom deals that were already starting to turn on her. "She wants a war?" I exhaled, already formulating our response. "Then let's give her one." Within 24 hours, Nova Systems released a counterstatement. We didn't just deny the accusations. We proved them false. We exposed Vaughn Enterprises' plummeting revenue, the contracts they lost due to mismanagement. Then we launched a social media campaign, highlighting Celeste's failures. The response was immediate. Articles started to shift from attacking me to questioning her. Investors, already wary of Vaughn Enterprises' decline, pulled further away. Celeste had taken the first shot. Now, it was my turn to fire back. The betrayal that came next wasn't from my sister. It was from someone I once trusted. I arrived at Nova Systems that morning, expecting a routine meeting. Instead, I walked into a war zone. Matthias was waiting for me outside the conference room, his expression tense. He barely let me set my bag down before speaking. "We have a leak." His words were sharp, cutting through the morning like a blade. I stilled. "What do you mean?" He handed me a printed document, our new product designs. The same ones we had locked behind security measures, protected by encrypted networks, shared only with my most trusted employees. And yet, this is in Vaughn Enterprises' hands. For the first time in weeks, my heart truly stopped. I snatched the papers, flipping through them as if I could undo what had already happened. This was confidential information. No one outside of my inner circle should have had access to this. I looked up. "Who?" Matthias exhaled, jaw tightening. "We checked security footage. It's Jason." Jason Carter. My fingers curled around the documents as the realization settled into my bones. Jason had been one of the first people to stand by me when I left Vaughn Enterprises. He had been there when Nova Systems was nothing more than an idea, offering support, promising loyalty. I had trusted him, and now he had given everything to Celeste. A memory surfaced. Jason and I sitting in a cramped cafe, months ago, when I first approached him about joining Nova Systems. He had laughed, shaking his head. "You've got guts, Serafina. Taking on Vaughn Enterprises head-on?" "I don't have a choice," I had replied. I had thought he understood. I had thought he was on my side. But I was wrong. Now, I stared at the security footage playing on Matthias's screen. Jason slipping a flash drive into his pocket before leaving the office late at night. The truth hit like ice in my veins. "He wasn't my friend," I murmured. "He was always Celeste's spy." I didn't wait. I found Jason. He was arrogant enough to still be in Chicago, meeting with investors, acting as if he hadn't just sold me out. I walked straight into his office, shutting the door behind me before he even had the chance to react. He barely looked guilty. If anything, he looked amused. "You've been busy," I said, voice dangerously calm. Jason smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I had a better offer." I held his gaze. "Why?" He shrugged. "You think you're untouchable? Celeste made me an offer I couldn't refuse." I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel betrayed. I just felt cold. Jason thought he had played me. But I wasn't finished yet. I left without another word, my mind already calculating the next move. Back at Nova Systems, I gathered Matthias and the team. "We fight back," I said, voice steady. "And we win." Celeste thought she had stolen something valuable. She thought she had gutted my company from the inside. So I let her believe it. We planted false data. We let Jason take back fake product blueprints, flawed, unstable technology designed to fail in real-world application. Celeste took the bait instantly. Within days, Vaughn Enterprises announced their newest breakthrough, technology they had supposedly developed in secret. In reality, it was my trap. They rushed the product into production, eager to beat Nova Systems to market. And it failed. Spectacularly. Investors pulled out. The media turned on Celeste. Vaughn Enterprises took another massive hit. And I watched from a distance, smiling. "Betrayal cuts deep," I murmured, "but I make sure it cuts both ways." Celeste thought she had outmaneuvered me. Instead, she walked straight into my trap. But when people are desperate, they don't back down. They double down. And Celeste was about to make her most reckless move yet. Vaughn Enterprises was unraveling. The company my father had built, the empire I had saved, was now days away from total collapse. Investors were pulling out. The stock price had plunged so low that financial analysts had already started calling it a lost cause. Clients were abandoning ship, refusing to renew contracts. The damage was too severe, too deep. Nathan Wolfe, the company's lead legal counsel, had been loyal to my father for years, but even he could see the writing on the wall. "We're out of options," he told Celeste during an emergency board meeting. "There's nothing left to salvage." But Celeste didn't believe in reality. She refused to see the cracks forming beneath her feet. "This isn't over," she snapped. slamming a stack of documents onto the table. "We just need to be more aggressive. We need a new strategy." Nathan leaned back, unimpressed. "Celeste, this is over. The company is broke. No amount of spin is going to fix that." She glared at him, as if sheer willpower could change the truth. But it couldn't. I had made sure of that. So when Celeste walked into my office at Nova Systems later that evening, I wasn't surprised. But I was amused. She was a shadow of the woman who had once stolen my company, my title, my future. The smug arrogance was gone. Her designer dress was still impeccable, but there was an unmistakable tension in her face. For the first time, Celeste looked tired. She dropped into the chair across from my desk and exhaled slowly. "You have to stop this, Serafina." I leaned back, watching her carefully. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to beg. I tilted my head. "Stop what?" She let out a humorless laugh. "You know what? You've won. Vaughn Enterprises is finished. Just let it go." I didn't move, didn't blink. "No, Celeste," I said quietly. "You lost." She flinched. For years I had imagined this moment. I had dreamed of watching her break. And yet, as I sat across from her, I felt nothing. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I was just trying to survive," she muttered. "You don't understand what it's like to be in my position. To have—" I held up a hand. "Don't." Her mouth snapped shut. "You made your choice, Celeste," I said, my voice calm. "Now live with it." She stared at me, her lips pressing into a tight line. Then, without another word, she stood and walked out. And I thought that was the end. I was wrong. An hour later, my attorney burst into my office. "Vaughn Enterprises just filed a lawsuit against you," she said, breathless. "It's from Dominic." My pulse remained steady. "For what?" "He's trying to block Nova Systems from acquiring any of Vaughn's remaining assets. He's claiming that you signed contracts years ago that still bind you to Vaughn Enterprises." I exhaled slowly. Dominic Vaughn. Even at the very end, he still clung to his delusion of control. I knew exactly what contracts he was referring to, the same ones he had tricked me into signing years ago when I was still naive enough to trust him. The ones that had stolen my software from me. I could fight this in court, drag it out, spend years entangled in legal battles with a company that was already dead. Or I could end this, right now. The next morning, I made my final move. Instead of fighting Dominic's lawsuit, I bought out Vaughn Enterprises' remaining debt. I didn't just defeat them, I owned them. Legally, I forced Vaughn Enterprises into liquidation. It was over. That evening, I received one last phone call from my father. His voice was tight, controlled. "You're destroying your own family name." I let a beat of silence stretch between us. Then, quietly, I said, "No." "You did that a long time ago." And then I hung up. The name Vaughn Enterprises would disappear forever. And I was the one who made it happen. But even as I stood victorious, the past had one final truth to reveal. I walked through what was left of Vaughn Enterprises, my footsteps echoing in the hollowed-out space, the once grand lobby, where high-profile deals had been made, where executives had whispered about market domination, was now empty. The sleek black and gold logo that had once stood as a symbol of my father's empire was being stripped from the walls, the letters unceremoniously taken down, piece by piece. The company was gone. I should have felt something, vindication, satisfaction, even regret. But as I stood there, watching the last remnants of Vaughn Enterprises disappear, I felt only finality. It was over. A few days later, an envelope arrived at my office. No return address, just my name, written in familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, aged at the edges, the ink slightly smudged. Dominic Vaughn's handwriting. "Serafina, you were always the one who deserved it." But I was too proud to admit it. I never truly believed Celeste was the right choice. I knew you were stronger, smarter, capable of building something greater than Vaughn Enterprises could ever be. But I also knew that as long as I held you here, under my roof, under my control, you'd never become the woman you were meant to be. So I let you go the only way I knew how. I pushed you. I wanted you to prove me wrong, and you did. Maybe one day you'll understand. Dominic. I stared at the letter, my fingers tightening around the edges. This wasn't an apology. This wasn't a plea for forgiveness. This was justification. Even at the end, my father believed he had orchestrated everything, that his cruelty, his betrayal, had somehow been a lesson. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. I wouldn't burn it. I wouldn't frame it. It would sit there, forgotten, just like the man who wrote it. A few days later, I met them, Dominic and Celeste. One last time. It was strange seeing them like this. My father, once an unshakable force in the business world, now looked small. His once pristine suit hung loosely on him, his face aged beyond his years. Celeste sat beside him, her usual arrogance dulled, though she still held herself high, as if pretending she was still untouchable. But we all knew the truth. They had lost. Celeste exhaled, crossing her arms. "Are you happy now, Serafina?" Her voice was hollow, edged with resentment. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "I didn't destroy you. You did that to yourselves." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, but she said nothing. Dominic cleared his throat. "We could rebuild," he said, as if the past year had never happened. As if he could erase the war between us with just those words. We could start over, together. I didn't hesitate. No. A flicker of something, defeat, crossed his face. "Some things," I said quietly, "are meant to end." And with that, I turned and walked away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. A week later, I stood at the top of Nova Systems headquarters, watching the city stretch out before me. This company, this empire, was mine. Not stolen, not gifted, not handed down. Built. By me. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. As I stand here today, looking at everything I've built, I realize something important. Power isn't given, it's taken. Respect isn't handed to you. You earn it. And sometimes, the best thing that can happen is being forced to walk away from something that was never meant for you. This journey wasn't just about winning a corporate war. It was about proving that self-worth isn't defined by family approval or past failures. It's about knowing your own value, even when the world tries to diminish it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No one can take away what you create with your own hands. They might steal your ideas, betray your trust, or try to rewrite history, but as long as you keep moving forward, they will never own your future. So, to anyone watching who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told they weren't good enough, don't let them decide your story. The people who try to bury you forget one thing. You are the seed. What do you think? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away to find your true power? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this video resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another powerful story. The best is yet to come.